Welcome to Real Talk. I'm really excited today because we're going to unpack a topic that's, well, far more complex and fascinating than most people give it credit for: product development.
It really is.
We want to look beyond just the surface, the cool ideas, and really get to grips with what it actually takes to bring a successful product to market, the kind customers genuinely want to buy.
And keep buying.
Exactly. So, our mission here in this conversation is to sort of reveal those intricate, vital steps.
hmm
Now, this is just the first part of 4 installments where we'll peel back the layers on this whole process. Today, we're kicking things off with Phase 1 pre-review.
The starting point.
Think of it as the bedrock. Yeah, the essential, often kind of hidden foundation that makes everything else work.
And it absolutely is the foundation. Look, what's really crucial to understand here is that product development, at its core, it isn't just some sudden flash of inspiration. It's actually a deeply strategic and, importantly, data-driven process.
Right, not just guesswork.
Not at all. It's really about creating something that customers are genuinely willing to open their wallets for repeatedly.
Yeah.
And to guide us through this, we're drawing insights directly from Verwant. That's Verwant.
For want, got it.
Yes. And you, our listener, you've provided these incredibly valuable materials from www.firstwant.co.za. Our goal is just to boil down the key takeaways for you.
Fantastic. Okay, let's get into it then. Phase 1, pre-review. This is where it all begins, and yet you hear it so often underplayed or forgotten, isn't it?
It really is, surprisingly often.
It makes me think of that James Baker quote, the 5 Ps. Proper planning prevents poor performance. That really sets the tone, I think, emphasizing that initial, often unseen effort.
It absolutely does. This phase,
Yeah.
it's all about laying a really rigorous groundwork. It's the difference fundamentally between just hoping for success and actually building for it.
I like that.
Yeah, making sure that every single decision, every step is data-informed and strategic, not just based on a gut feeling. It's kind of like baking a cake,
Yeah.
right? You need the right ingredients in the right amounts, measured properly. Otherwise, you just end up with a very expensive brick.
A very expensive brick indeed. So, okay, where do you even begin with this rigorous groundwork? Most people hear trend research and they picture like someone just grabbing a load of cool images and slapping them onto a mood board.
Right, the Pinterest board approach.
Yeah, but I suspect that's not quite the full picture, is it? What does effective trend research really look like then, beyond that mood board?
No, you're right. It's far, far more than that. Effective trend research, according to Verwant, is something that has to be conducted with purpose. That's the key phrase.
With purpose.
The entire point is ensuring the product, and actually the whole range, stays relevant. If you
Yeah.
think about it, it's described as very similar to using what we know today as AI.
Oh, interesting analogy.
Yeah, what you input into the system dictates what you get out. Simple as that. If your inputs are vague or just completely misdirected, your outputs are going to be just as useless. It'll lead you down completely the wrong path.
Right, garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly. So this means it's vitally important to know your specific industry and, even more granularly, your own company's identity.
Okay.
For example, you wouldn't research, say, sports clothing trends if your business is focused on sleepwear. Obvious, maybe, but crucial.
Makes sense.
And even within sports, you've got to differentiate. Are you looking at team apparel, individual sports,
Yeah.
outdoor gear, or just recreational wear? They're all different.
Different needs, different trends.
Totally. And for fashion, same thing. Is it everyday casual stuff or is it evening wear, occasion wear? Being crystal clear on what your brand and company stands for, what the identity is, and what needs you want to fill for your customer, that's absolutely fundamental.
So it's about focus.
Extreme focus, being very particular and detailed in your searches, as Verwant puts it, will set you up for success. It's about precision, not just casting a wide, vague net.
That makes perfect sense. It's about being really intentional. You can't build a coherent product line if your starting point, your research, is just all over the map. But, if you want to know where you're going, you often need to understand where you've been first. So what about this post-seasonal review? What's involved there, and how do you actually, learn from the past effectively?
Ah, yes, the post-seasonal review. That's precisely about analyzing past performance to make smarter future decisions. And what's really interesting here is the critical team dynamic involved.
Okay.
Verwant highlights 3 functional roles that are key: the designer, the buyer, and the planner. They must, and I stress, must function as a team or unit. Why? because each part plays a pivotal role.
So no silos.
Absolutely no silos. If one person isn't pulling their weight, or maybe if they're just not truly collaborating, the whole process downstream suffers. Big time.
Right. And what does this review actually look like? Is it just a meeting?
It typically is a meeting, yeah.
Yeah.
And it usually gathers all the key stakeholders. You'll have everyone from the buyer and maybe their assistant, the planner, the allocator, the designer, maybe the design manager, buying manager, planning manager, right up to the merchandise executive.
Wow. Okay. A full house.
It's a full house, yeah. Making sure every angle is covered, every voice heard when you're analyzing what happened. And crucially, they come armed with data, not just opinions or feelings.
Data, right. What kind of data?
Verwant gives a great example. You'll see things like the product code, that's the unique system ID, like a UPC or barcode. You'll see the GP percent, which is your gross profit percentage.
How much money you made.
Exactly. Then the AWC percent, that's average weekly clearance, how much stock sold per week on average, very important. And TTL clearance, the total stock sold over the whole period. And finally, based on that AWC percent, there's usually a simple rating.
Like good, bad, ugly.
Something like that. The example given uses poor, average, good, excellent. So for instance, you might see product 101452, maxi dress fuchsia, 52% GP, 7% AWC, 54% TTL clearance, rating good.
Ah, okay. So it's not just if something sold, but how profitably it sold, and crucially, how quickly it moved. It gives you real intelligence, doesn't it? A clear picture of what actually resonated.
Precisely. It's the difference between surface level and deep understanding.
What other tools or visuals do they use in these reviews to make them, really effective?
Good question. To paint that full picture, these reviews need specific visual aids. You absolutely need the post-seasonal document, usually prepared by the planner, then a comprehensive SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats that the full team contributes to.
The whole team does the SWOT.
Yes, very important for buy-in and diverse perspectives. Then you need a competitor analysis, typically put together by the buyer and designer, and of course you need the actual physical samples of the styles you're discussing. Can't just rely on pictures.
Right, you need to feel the fabric, see the construction.
Exactly. And clear performance labels on those samples. Poor, average, good, excellent. So it's instantly visible how something performed.
And the competitor analysis, how deep does that go?
Oh, it's pretty deep. Based on Verwant's templates, it's not just a quick look at their website. It's a dive into everything from their in-store experience, their online presence, their pricing strategies, even what their sales staff know about the product or don't know.
Really getting into the weeds.
Absolutely. It covers their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and other SWOT, but focused on competitors and market trends. It's all about understanding exactly where you stand in the market landscape and, critically, where you can find an edge, where you can win. Positioning is key.
Wow, that is incredibly thorough. It really hammers home the idea that product development isn't just about, sketching pretty pictures. It's deep analysis, deep learning.
That's it.
But this is where the rubber meets the road, right? How do you take all these insights, trends, past performance, competitors, and actually translate them into a tangible design? How does that product design part happen?
Right. This is where that informed creativity really kicks in. Garment design, as Verwant explains it, is a central pillar throughout the entire product lifecycle. It genuinely influences everything.
Everything.
Pretty much. The garment's look, its aesthetics, sure, but also its functionality, its quality, its marketability, and yeah, ultimately its overall success in actually meeting what customers want and need.
So it connects back to everything done before.
Directly.
Yeah.
All that information gathered, the trend research, the competitor analysis, and maybe most importantly, what worked and what didn't work in previous seasons that directly informs the concept or the design for the new product. It's not designing in a vacuum.
Okay. And who drives this?
Well, this means the buyer and the designer really need to work very, very closely together. It has to be a true collaboration, a partnership.
Makes sense.
They're basically using this rich tapestry of data, all the insights, to make informed design decisions. For example, they have to consider the fabric. What's its drape like? What's the quality? The construction of the fabric itself. And what's its end purpose? A dress fabric is different from a coat fabric.
Obviously.
Then there's construction. This is huge because labor alone can be around, say, 40% of your garment cost, maybe even more depending where you make it, like in South Africa.
40%? Wow.
Yeah. So things like how the seams are constructed, any technical operations needed, the overall complexity, it all directly hits the final cost massively.
Okay. Fabric, construction, what else?
And color. Color is never, ever conceptualized in isolation. You can't just pick a color you like. It requires color balance, within the whole range context.
Color balance, meaning?
Meaning how it fits with everything else. Does it complement other pieces? Does it fit the seasonal palette? And finally, they need to think about complementary product. Do you already have pieces that are meant to be worn with this new design? Or do you still need to create those tops, bottoms, accessories to complete the look?
Ah, so you're designing outfits, essentially, not just single items.
Yeah, exactly. You're offering a solution, a complete look for the customer, not just selling isolated pieces. That's much more powerful.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, it's not just designing a cool shirt. It's designing a cool shirt that, makes sense for your brand, fits with everything else, is priced right, and is actually profitable.
That's the goal.
Okay, moving along then. We have the seasonal strategy. Now, this sounds like the forward-looking twin to the post-seasonal review we talked about earlier.
It is exactly that. The seasonal strategy is absolutely informed by the post-seasonal review.
Yeah.
It takes all those hard-won lessons and applies them to future planning.
Uh-huh.
It uses a very similar format, similar KPIs, key performance indicators,
Right.
but with some really crucial additions that make it forward-looking, that make it strategic for the next season.
Okay, like what kind of additions?
Well, one of the main ones is central budgets.
Mm.
You absolutely have to compare your proposed seasonal strategy against the company's overall sales targets. Are your plans ambitious enough? Are they realistic? Do they align with where the business needs to go financially?
Keeping it grounded in the overall business goals.
Precisely. Then there are things like supplier shifts. If there are any major changes planned in where you're sourcing product from, that has to be factored in here. Verwant gives a really compelling example. Yeah, talking about SADC countries like Mauritius, Madagascar, Lesotho being duty-free for import into certain markets. If you decide to shift a chunk of your production from, say, China to SADC,
Yeah.
that has potentially massive margin implications and overall profitability for the company.
Huge financial impact.
Huge. It could literally make or break a season's profitability.
Yeah.
So that kind of strategic shift is discussed here.
Makes sense. Budgets, suppliers, what else?
And finally, product shifts. This is where future trends really impact decisions. Verwant uses the great example. What if analysis shows skinny jeans are out and cargo pants are in?
Okay, a classic fashion shift.
Right. And this kind of shift dramatically affects things like your average garment cost, because cargoes might be more expensive to make. It affects your stock investment, how much money you tie up in inventory, and, of course, your profitability, especially if your company historically had a really strong, profitable business in skinny jeans.
Yeah, that requires a major pivot.
A complete rethink, potentially, of your product mix, your buying quantities, your financial planning. Anticipating and planning for these big product shifts is absolutely critical in the seasonal strategy phase.
That example really drives home the real-world impact of these strategic decisions. Okay, so we've done the research, the look back, the look forward, the design concepts. How do we move to that crucial step of supplier brief and negotiation strategy, actually getting these things made? And I wonder, what happens if a buyer doesn't really play hardball here? What's the risk?
The negotiation phase. Yeah, this is critical because it directly informs your option count, basically.
Yeah.
How many styles and colors per style you'll have, and also the volumes you're planning to produce.
So the scale of the whole operation.
Exactly. With your design concepts ready and all that strategic info from the seasonal strategy, now it's time to actually tender out your designs to potential suppliers for costing and initial samples.
Okay, the briefing stage.
Yes, and a strong design brief is absolutely paramount here. It can't be vague. It needs to be detailed, specific, and accompanied by a measurement specification, a detailed design drawing or CAD, the intended units per color, broken down by month, and crucially, a target price.
A target price from the start.
Yes, you need to tell them what you're aiming for.
Yeah.
Without that level of detail in the brief, you just can't expect suppliers to deliver what you actually want at the price you need. And Verwant also stresses it's really important to tender out each product to at least 3 suppliers that specialize in that particular product set.
Create some competition.
Precisely. That competition is your leverage. Without it, well, you're almost certainly leaving money on the table.
Right. And the negotiation itself, the playing hardball part.
This is where the buyer's skill, their power, really comes into play. Verwant emphasizes that your target cost should be 10–15% below the actual cost you are willing to pay. You build in that negotiation room from the start.
Setting expectations low.
Strategically low. And here's a critical piece of advice from the material. Never accept the first price the supplier is offering you, even if it is within the target you gave them.
Really? Even if it meets your target?
Even then. Because, as Verwant says, playing up suppliers against each other is the most power a buyer can yield in a negotiation phase. This is where you make your margin.
So what's the risk if they don't do that, if they're too nice?
The risk is inflated costs, simple as that, which means lower margins for the business, maybe higher prices for the customer, and ultimately a less competitive product.
Hmm.
Failing to negotiate effectively means you're basically giving away profit potential right at the source. It's about fundamentally shaping that supplier relationship to your advantage.
That's a crucial point.
And typically during this phase, you'll request what's called a countersample from maybe at least two of those competing vendors.
Countersample.
Yeah, it uses the correct fabric you specified, but usually in just a stock color they have on hand. This lets you assess their quality, workmanship, and their general understanding of your brief without having to commit to a full, expensive color run up front. You compare those countersamples, see who did the best job interpreting your design, and then you decide which product or supplier you want to actually show in your range review meeting.
That's a fascinating insight. The negotiation, it's far more strategic than just asking for a discount. It's really about setting the stage for significant leverage and protecting your profit.
Absolutely fundamental.
Okay, let's wrap up this packed phase one with color selection and balancing. We touched on color earlier, but how do you ensure that visual harmony and, I guess, market appeal across the entire range?
Right, this is a really collaborative visual process.
Yeah,
Typically, the buyer and designer sit down together to work through the complete range that they plan to present for approval.
side by side.
Yeah, very hands-on, and it's incredibly helpful, almost essential, to have a complete range board available where a front view CAD, that's the computer-aided design flat sketch, of each style in the color you initially briefed to suppliers is visible all on one page.
See the whole collection at once.
Exactly. And alongside that board, you absolutely need your approved seasonal color palette for reference. Keep it visible.
Okay, and the balancing part.
Color balancing, as Verwant describes it, is essentially making sure you have a balanced representation of your color palette in relation to the historical color performance.
Okay, connecting back to that postseason review data again.
Always connecting back. What this means practically is if your top-selling color historically is, say, magenta, and maybe your bottom-selling color is forest green, then as Verwant points out logically, it will make no sense to have 60% of your range in forest green and only 5% in magenta.
Huh. Yeah, sounds like a recipe for disaster, or at least a lot of green markdowns.
Exactly. A recipe for disappointment and dead stock. You have to respect what the customer has told you they like through their past purchases.
Makes sense. Any other pitfalls with color?
Another key point is you also don't want a specific commodity, like, say, all your shirts to be dominated by just one color, while another commodity, like trousers, is dominated by a completely different color. That looks disjointed.
Ah, you need spread.
A balanced spread across all the different types of products is required for a cohesive range that looks appealing and shops well together. It's often really helpful, Verwant suggests, to look at the range in terms of key looks or potential outfits.
Like we discussed with complementary product.
Exactly. Build your color selection by outfit instead of looking at individual items in isolation. Does this top work with these trousers in these colors? And there's a tool mentioned, a range structure triangle, which can be a useful guide.
Range structure triangle.
Yeah, it helps you apply percentages to your different color categories. Your core colors, the basics, the never-outs. Your seasonal colors, the key hues for that specific season.
Yeah.
And your trend colors, the more fashion-forward, maybe riskier shades. It ensures you have the right mix.
The right balance of safe bets and newness.
Precisely. Enough classics to satisfy the loyal customer, enough seasonal color to feel fresh, and just enough trend color to create excitement and show you're current. It keeps the customer engaged.
That's a perfect way to bring all those threads together. So that completes, wow, phase one, pre-review and the product lifecycle. That is a lot of work.
It is.
All this intense thinking, all this detailed planning, data analysis, negotiation, strategic work, it now all goes into preparing for your range review meeting, which is where the range hopefully gets approved and signed off. It's just a mountain of work before a single stitch is even sewn on the final product.
It really is. And what's truly remarkable, maybe when you stop and think about it, is the sheer amount of strategic thinking, collaboration, and meticulous planning that goes into even a single product idea before it ever gets the official green light for production.
Yeah.
It's honestly a testament to the rigorous process required to create something the customer genuinely desires, finds value in, and ultimately is willing to consistently pay for. Just consider, maybe, How many products around you right now, wherever you're listening, have likely gone through this very same intense pre-review process?
It really puts things in perspective, and we've only just scratched the surface here with Phase 1. Join us next time for more real talk on product development, where we'll dive into what happens after this crucial first phase is complete. You won't want to miss it.